Chapter 1. 7 crayons are enough. They always arrived in the late afternoon. Slow beams of yellow light moved across the wall behind the hospital bed and highlighted the hand-drawn pictures he'd drawn on their visits. His very own art show. Mom had referred to that wall after she taped up his third drawing for Grandma. He was so relieved when his mom immediately took his hand in hers. Grandma looked very old, and it scared him. So small and bony, her wrinkled face reminded him of the worn-out crochet blanket she'd made him when he was born. Under her speckled skin, she was white as the bed sheets. He glanced down and spotted a tissue tucked up Mom's sleeve the same way Grandma did before Mom had to help her with everything. He hated seeing, knowing his mom was so unhappy, just like she'd been the weeks after his father left. His parents had always argued, but mostly about bills. Too many bills to pay. There was a boy named Billy in his kindergarten class. But how many bills did his parents know? And why did they owe these bills so much money? One day during a snowstorm, 2 men came to their front door. His father said some cuss words and ended up with a bloody nose and a swollen eye. Mom and Grandma were huddled together on the couch. Mom sent him to his bedroom when the men threatened his father that they would be back. "This is all your fault, woman." His father sounded angrier than he had in a while. "Why does your old lady need to live here?" "Huh? I can barely cover our own damn expenses." "Now, you're telling me we got all these new hospital bills." He heard the sound of something smashing and crawled under his bed to hide. "Just put her in a home like most people do. You ain't working." "Nope, because you decided it was more important right now to quit your damn job, to stay home all day with blue hair here and the kid. You're all worthless pieces of shit, you know that. She's my mother. She's all the family I've got," was all Mom had said. He didn't understand why his mom would say that. He was her family, too, wasn't he? He would rather be her family than his father's family. He feared his father's temper. He hid and waited until Mom knew it was safe. His father always called him a sissy and a mama's boy. He wasn't sure what those words meant, but they both sounded like nice things to him. That day the men came to their house, he could tell his father had beers. Eventually, his father tired out and yelled that he needed to cool off. It was snowing. Shouldn't he want to warm up? He climbed from under his bed and cautiously watched from his upstairs dormer window as his father finally screeched and swerved his pickup down their unpaved driveway. Gravel spit from under his pickup truck tires, marking the fresh fallen snow with big black dots. The men never came back, and neither did his father. The saddest part for him was that he didn't miss his father at all. His grandma confessed she didn't either. Good riddance of rotten apples or something like that. She'd said a few weeks after he'd left. He still felt sorry for his mom. The nurse came in the room and smiled in his direction. "Hey, little man. Good to see you again. You having a nice visit today." "Yep." He liked this nurse. She always ruffled his curls. She adjusted machines on wheels that reminded him of robots, with all their beeps and lights. He loved the screen showing numbers and lines. On one visit, Mom explained that each light and sound told the story of what was going on inside a person. "Then why didn't God make our skin see-through?" Mom had laughed out loud at that. It was so great to hear her really laugh, like it was from her head to her toes. "Well, that would make it much easier for doctors and nurses, I guess. A bit embarrassing, maybe? I don't know." She began to laugh again. Grandma said, Most people are embarrassed in a bathing suit. Can you imagine someone who smokes too much and can see their own lungs turning black? She coughed and needed to catch her breath. She did that a lot lately, and sometimes her chest made a rattling noise. I bet they quit their bad habits straight away, don't you think? He loved these visits, especially if he could get his mom and grandma to laugh. It was like music to his ears. Laughter really was the best medicine. Sometimes, after long pauses in their conversations, the room would go very still for a few moments, and if he listened real hard, he could hear the hospital monitor's beeps and chirps, mixing perfectly together, making music of their own. Maybe it wasn't so bad after all. It's like a spaceship, Grandma, he'd said the first time he saw the monitors in the dark. But he was never allowed to touch them. Nor was he allowed to play with the electric bed. The first time he'd done that, he was alone with Grandma. When Mom returned to the room, she gently scolded him that the bed was in that position for a reason. It was better for breathing. Can we have a word in the hall? The nurse gestured to Mom to join her. These secret hallway discussions seemed to happen at every visit. Mom nodded in the nurse's direction, tucked Grandma's shawl around her shoulders, and turned to him. Why don't you draw Grandma a nice picture, love? And his mom slipped from the room. He loved drawing. It was his favorite thing besides when Mom read to him. She didn't read too much to him now that he was almost 6. He was happy reading his own books, but he still loved when Mom snuggled up next to him in his bed and read him a story until they both fell asleep. He took out his art supplies. It wasn't much, just plain white paper and a tattered box of crayons. Look, Grandma, I still have the crayons you bought me for my birthday last year. I'm going to be 6 soon. He knew she didn't have any money, but maybe Santa would bring him a new box of crayons. I remember, she said in a tiny, scratchy voice. I love all the pictures you draw. She paused, turned toward the window. A bruise-colored sky darkened. She spoke without looking at him. Yes, you will be 6. He set to work, carefully taking out one crayon at a time. There was a total of 8 in the torn box. He only took out 7. Some were broken in half, like the green one and the purple one. He had used the red and yellow crayons the most. Those 2 crayons were so worn down. They were just big enough for him to pinch them between his little fingers. Grandma called them cheerful colors, said they were good colors to paint a kitchen. The day she'd said that he'd drawn her a picture of a yellow and red kitchen. She loved it. It was the first picture to be taped over the hospital bed. He had to save what was left of those 2 crayons for a special picture, because they would only last one more. He loved the white crayon. Grandma showed him how he could fix mistakes, like when he accidentally went out of lines. It was a special crayon, because white was all colors. He didn't understand that, but it didn't matter. It was still his favorite one. He chose the blue one, and the bigger half of the green crayon. He remembered just after his 5th birthday when they'd all left the doctor's office. Grandma had been crying, and Mom said she was just feeling blue. So he didn't use the blue crayon very often when he drew her pictures. He remembered how much he enjoyed watching the fish dart around in the aquarium while they sat in the waiting room of the specialist's office that day. How about a whale, Grandma? That sounds lovely, darling. He saw a television commercial once where a person could send money to help save the whales. He really liked that idea, because if whales could be saved, then so could people. Why didn't they have television commercials to save the people? He would send his piggy bank money to that commercial for sure. He was nearly done with the green and blue parts of the ocean when he heard his mom's voice in the hallway. "What are you trying to tell me with all this medical mumbo jumbo? I'm really trying to understand." A hushed tone, then Mom's voice again. "What do you mean the blood count is still way too low? After all this time?" She sounded angry like the time he put mud in the ice trays. Or the time he snuck Grandma some brandy. "Isn't there anything else you can do? Please, there must be something." A hushed voice again, then a deep, muffled moaning noise. "Dear God." "Only a few more weeks? What am I going to do?" Then silence. He looked over at his grandma, but she was resting her eyes, which he knew meant napping. He thought about blood count because Mom said that a lot. He didn't understand how blood was counted. It would be like counting water. He would tell his mom to find Count Dracula. Of course, Dracula could make the blood count higher. It made sense. He smiled at his clever idea. After a while, Mom came back in the room and sat on the edge of the hospital bed. Her eyes were red and puffy. He tried to cheer her up, so he blurted out his idea about Count Dracula helping the blood count. Mom's forehead wrinkled like she was thinking about it. Then she laughed, but when her eyes squeezed shut, a few tears rolled down her cheeks. He knew people sometimes cry when they were laughing, but his mom's tears didn't seem like happy tears at all. He felt a lump rise in his own throat. His father had told him that big boys don't cry. When his father left forever, Mom said that wasn't true. Tears were good because they carried the sorrow out of the body. Even when someone laughed really hard, they felt better afterward because sorrow they may not have even known they were carrying came out in their happy tears, too. This time, he swallowed that lump. He would be brave, not hide under his bed. He showed Mom and Grandma the picture of the whale, and as always, they made a big deal about his amazing art. They all laughed because they were running out of space on the wall behind the bed. He yawned just as the visiting hours or over announcement echoed from hallway speakers. They had a long group hug, and Mom adjusted Grandma's shawl. Again, he no longer needed to hold his mom's hand because was a big boy. He was almost 6. Before they left the room, Mom turned off the light switch. He turned, and as always, Grandma blew him a kiss. He pretended to catch it. Then Mom closed the door, and together they left the hospital. He was alone again, in his spaceship with the blinking lights and beeps. He listened for a song, but none came from the machines this time. He gently put the 7 crayons back in their torn box and tried his best to ignore the black crayon, the absence of color, the crayon he would never use. Chapter 2, Muscle Memory. It was a kind of quiet you only notice in high-end department stores on weekday afternoons, with its low lighting, plush carpeted floors, and overhead speakers playing a song you used to love. Most of the items were well out of Madeline's price range, but this was the store the engaged couple had chosen for their gift registry. The wedding invite was from an old college friend who was 7 months pregnant and marrying her longtime boyfriend. Madeline was excited for a friend, but only agreed to attend if she didn't have to be in the wedding party. Her friend, like anyone with a heart, of course understood. She just seemed thrilled that Madeline would be joining them on their special day. In front of a display of porcelain serving bowls, Madeline hovered one hand absently over the edge of a cream-colored dish with delicate silver trim. It was elegant and timeless, neutral, just like the card she'd picked out along with her ambivalence about attending. She'd not been to a wedding or any other formal event in forever. She selected the bowl and was about to turn down the next aisle when she saw him. Mark. It took her longer than it should have to recognize him. For starters, the beard was new. Or maybe not new, maybe just unfamiliar after so much time. His hair was shorter than she remembered with the debut of gray at his temples. Mark was studying a box of wine glasses, brow furrowed like he was trying to solve something way more complicated than stemware. Madeline froze, heart stumbling. She ducked slightly, as if crouching by a display of silver candle holders could not only hide her, but somehow erase the last decade of her life. But even before she could pivot the other way, she knew. Mark had seen her, too. There was a moment, suspended and electric, where she waited to see if he would walk away. He didn't. What the hell was Mark doing shopping in this store anyway? Mark hated shopping with a passion. A gift for a woman? Shit! She quickly reversed her stance, returned the serving bowl to where she found it. The gift could wait until another day. Her legs moved on instinct, wild and unthinking, like a newly born fawn, until she stood outside beneath the waning October sun. Her hands were trembling. Madeline knew she was being ridiculous. She didn't want to see him. Not really. But she knew she had, otherwise she'd regret being so juvenile. Last she'd heard, he was in Lisbon. They'd been married, and she had enough regrets when it came to Mark. So she stood by her car, pretending to search for her car keys and her purse, knowing they were in her jacket pocket. She played a guessing game with the items she fingered and waited for the sliding doors to open like parting stage curtains. When he came out, he carried a small rectangle box wrapped in gold paper and adorned with a white bow. He didn't look surprised to find her waiting there. Mark was still so handsome in his suit, with those broad shoulders and naturally tanned skin. As he approached, he loosened his tie the way he'd done so often over their time together. She found it sexy, even just then. "Hey, Mads," he said, stopping a few feet away. The way he said her nickname, it stirred something. She didn't hate it. He was the only one who ever called her that, and it rolled off his tongue just as it had 16 years ago, when they first started dating. His voice was quieter than she remembered. Or maybe it was just tired, not unlike her own. "Hi." Instinctively, her arms folded across her chest, a shield across her heart, she supposed. They stood like that for a beat too long. Two people stitched together by years of unraveling. "You look great. How have you been?" he said. Madeline laughed uncomfortably, adjusting her yoga outfit, aware she'd put on a few pounds over the years. She knew he was being nice. She had just come from the gym, her hair in a tousled mess atop her head, and she wasn't wearing a stitch of makeup. "Oh, stop. I look terrible, but all in all, I've been doing pretty good." She looked into his blue eyes for the first time since they'd first spotted each other. "How about you is the question. I heard you moved to Portugal." "Spain, and it was just a year sabbatical teaching a Polytech course at University of Barcelona. I really loved it there, would consider retiring there, maybe someday, but I miss my motherland, Mother Togue, and my mother. She's not doing well." "I'm sorry to hear that. She was always so sweet." "Please tell her I said hello." Perhaps the wrapped gift was for his mother. It wasn't. Why did she care? "Mom always loved you, but you know that." It was tough on her, too, although not even near as Bailey died. Madeline was stymied when that escaped her mouth. Why had she just blurted it out like that? Oh, Mads, I'm so sorry. I know how much you love Bailey. I love him too. I was so angry at first, but I miss him, no, after I'd left. Always thought, well, at least Mads is Bailey. She cut him off. He was up there, almost 14, and labs are known for hip issues. Her estranged husband was 2 feet away, close enough that she caught a faint scent of his same familiar aftershave, yet he may as well have still been in Spain. She wanted to run away as fast as she could, and run to him at the same time. He must have read her expression, as always. Hey, I have a little time to kill. There's a new coffee shop just a block from here. Want to join me? For old times? Well, I don't drink coffee, remember? She smiled and rolled her eyes. Damn, that's right, of course, I remember. He held up his hands as if she was pointing a gun at him. Tea! 2 tea bags, 2 sugars, and a drop of honey. He held up the gift, and for a split second, she thought he was going to hand it to her. Come on, I'll just put this in my car and we can walk. I can't. But he was already headed towards his vehicle a few spaces away. What can it hurt? After thinking that, she realized a whole lot. It could open old wounds that hadn't even scarred yet, even after so many long, lonely years. Ready? And just like they'd never been apart, he took her arm in his, and together they walked side by side. She'd always heard parallel talk was the best way to converse in awkward situations, because you weren't forced to have eye contact, like parent and teen driving together side by side, or a couple sitting side by side on a therapy couch. They fell in stride as always, his long legs slowing just a bit for her to keep up at a comfortable pace. Are you still teaching at Princeton? She had no idea what he'd been doing since the last time they'd seen each other. She didn't really want to know. It was too painful. But maybe they could have a sort of relationship when in the rare event they ran into each other again. It would be far less uncomfortable. They could be acquaintances, people who knew some of the same people. That was good enough. Yep, I actually just made department chair. Dr. Manzi finally retired. You mean Hansy Manzi? I had him when I was a student there. He has to be 110 by now. How he survived the hashtag #MeToo movement is beyond me. Private Ivy League institution, I guess. His Parkinson's got pretty bad, and he actually became more pleasant to be around. So, as academia does have those bumpy rugs hard to walk on with so much shoved under them, they left him alone. Not so easy to get away with nonsense like that these days. Better yet get tenure. They continued their superficial banter until they reached the coffee shop. A bell rang when they entered. This made Madeline smile, nostalgically for some reason. The place was empty aside from a well-dressed woman on a laptop by the window and a reedy teenager scrolling through his phone at the counter. Mark chose a corner booth, and he went to the counter to order their drinks. Steaming mugs between them, Mark said, "So, are you still painting?" Madeline gave a small, polite smile. "I still dabble, but there's so many unfinished canvases I'll never be able to return to. Better yet, even look at again. It's hard to find inspiration." Her voice trailed off. Madeline was beginning to believe this interlude was a mistake. It was like a slow simmer for years was trying to boil its way to the surface, and she was doing everything in her power to tamp it down, but she just made crack in the veneer. How about your science fiction novel? Ever finish that? Madeline tucked a loose tendril of escaping curl behind her ear. No, that fell by the wayside like a lot of my dreams. He looked away momentarily. She studied his angled profile for a moment. He looked sad, but trying hard to hold it together. She knew it was her turn to break the ice. Has anyone ever told you your face would look good on a coin? They both laughed, and it came so naturally. I'll take that as a compliment. After a pause, Madeline said, "You do look different." "Different how?" She shrugged. "Bearded, older." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Yeah, well, that'll happen." "No, I mean in a good way. Like you've grown, matured." Very professorial. "Let's face it, we met as college seniors and married a few years later. We're now, what? Going on 37? We're both older, but I guess you seem better, more settled." Madeline knew he was clearly much more stable than she was, but she resigned herself long ago that she would never be completely happy again. She was careful to keep her tone light. If her mind went to that day 6 years ago, she'd never get out of that booth. Mark broke the silence. "I try every day to be the best I can be. I was selfish and hurtful, and I have never been brave enough to apologize to you. I'm so sorry." She didn't ask what he was sorry for. She didn't need to. "I'm sorry, too. I have had time to process at least some of our mistakes, our losses. I've had more therapy than a serial killer, for fuck's sake, and I come to the same conclusion every time. Too, I was selfish, even greedy. There's this part of me that feels like it's the devil's version of Gift of the Magi." Looking at him just then, Madeline could see the years in him, the weight of them, the scar tissue that didn't show. "I get it. I sometimes wake up from a sweat-drenched nightmare calling out, clutching the air." Mark raked his fingers through his dark, thick hair. "I keep coming back to that same question. What would we have done differently? We did what all upwardly mobile couples did. We wanted a bigger house, a better neighborhood, and schools to raise kids. We followed the rules of society. Would something else have befallen us had you not gotten that professorship, or I'd gotten the art apprenticeship in France? Every day I ask myself, if we'd stayed in that tiny apartment in Trenton with the cheap rent and the cockroaches smarter than we were. Even after you got pregnant, just lived simpler lives in our late 20s and stayed right there, just the three of us? Why couldn't I be satisfied with that? Nope, I needed that goddamn house on Country Club Lane with its built-in pool. Hey, stop beating yourself up. That month of house shopping, we'd made a deal. I'd give anything in the world to change my end of that deal. I barely had time to enjoy the damn pool anyway. Too busy making money, so we could have a life that afforded us everything. And in the end, it got us nothing. Mark's hand slammed the table, and it rattled their cups, and the barista glanced in their direction, concerned. Mark waved it off with an apology. Then, to her surprise, he started to weep. Tears rolled down his face, and he used the sleeve of his Italian linen dress shirt. "I am so sorry I just left. I ran because I was a coward. I couldn't deal with your pain because I was hurting so badly. The guilt was unbearable." Madeline felt a lump in her throat, but swallowed it back down. She hadn't seen Mark cry once throughout that whole ordeal. Not a tear shed. She was tears on tap for nearly a year. And, interestingly, here was Mark blaming himself, when in reality it was more on her. She took her estranged husband's hands in hers. "Listen, Mark, I was the one who insisted on getting a puppy. As much as I want to blame Bailey, he was a lab, a water dog. How could we have known?" We lived near the ninth hole of the golf course. Remember the first night in the new home when we christened that hole. Well, when you put it that way, it sounds so very romantic. She couldn't help but laugh and roll her eyes again. All these same movements and machinations, as if they'd never been apart. Well, it was that same ninth hole that sent that damn golf ball into the pool that Bailey had no choice but to bound in after. And well, it was inevitable he'd be followed by... And she almost said it. She almost said his little name, just his name, but she didn't. Instead, she watched the way Mark held his cup, the way his thumb circled the rim absently, just like he used to when he was trying not to say something. Their mutual grief that never aged. Madeline wondered why the moments we want to keep, to hold dear, dwindle, yet those memories we want to get stay with us forever, sometimes daily. They'd sat there for over an hour. Their conversation eventually meandering back to safety. Mark paid, and as always, he walked her from the coffee shop, opening the door for her and then placing his arm along the small of her back as they made their walk back to the store parking lot, both of them moving in silence momentarily. They were just Madeline and Mark again. At her car, her curiosity got the better of her. "So what's with the wrapped gift? Are you seeing someone?" She really wanted him to be happy, so why did she pray he said no? Seemingly relieved at the change of subject, Mark said, "No, still single." "You remember Jack from Delta Phi? He's marrying Jenny. You may remember her from your art classes. Well, they're getting married next Saturday, and I was invited." Madeline leaned against her car door. "Well, isn't that a fine plot twist? I'm invited to that wedding, too. That's why I was in store. I didn't even know they knew each other." They met in grad school years later. What a coincidence. He shook his head and smiled. "Well, I hope you'll save me a dance." Madeline couldn't help but giggle. "You hate dancing." To her shock, he grabbed her around the waist and pretended to reenact a tango, clumsy but adorable, because I suck at it, but I did pick up a few smooth moves in Spain. Still laughing, she took out her car keys and he opened her door. Her hand moved without thinking, resting lightly on his shoulder. She could feel the tremble in him. Madeline desperately needed to remember who they once were before that day. The joy, the laughter, the dancing, a time before the greed, the country club, the pool, before their shining light went out at just 5 years old. The day they believed the world had swallowed them whole. Maybe this was the only path to healing. Like everything else in life completely out of anyone's control, they found each other again because of someone else's love. Chapter 3, The Last Letter. The rain fell softly that morning. The sky was gray, and the air smelled of wet earth. In a small town by the river, a woman named Clara sat by the window of her old house. She was holding a piece of paper that had turned yellow with time. Her hand shook a little, and her eyes were filled with quiet sadness. Clara had lived alone for many years. Her husband had passed away long ago, and her son, Daniel, had moved to the city to work. He used to write letters to her every week, full of stories about his job and the people he met. Clara kept every letter in a wooden box beside her bed. It was her most precious treasure. The last letter she received from Daniel came 5 years ago. It was a short note written in a hurry. He said he was busy, but he promised to visit her soon. That visit never came. After that, the letter stopped. At first, Clara waited every day. She sat by the window, looking down the road, hoping to see her son walking toward her with his familiar smile. But the days turned into months, and the months turned into years. The road remained empty. People in the town said Daniel had a new life. Some said he went abroad. Others whispered that something bad had happened to him. Clara never believed the bad stories. She told herself that her son was just busy, that one day he would remember his old mother and come home again. Every morning, she prepared breakfast for two people, for herself and for Daniel. She would pour 2 cups of tea, place them on the table, and sit there in silence. The second cup always grew cold. When the mailman came, her heart always beat faster. She would open the door with hope, but the mailman would only shake his head. "No letter today, Mrs. Clara." She would smile politely and thank him, then close the door quietly. The neighbors felt sorry for her. They sometimes brought her food or helped fix the broken fence. She was kind to everyone, always smiling, but her eyes were full of loneliness that words could not describe. Clara found comfort in small things. She cared for a garden, growing roses and lilies. She loved watching them bloom under the sun. Every flower reminded her of Daniel's childhood, how he used to pick flowers for her and run around the garden, laughing. At night, Clara would sit by the fire and read Daniel's old letters again. She knew every word by heart, yet she still read them slowly, as if hearing his voice through the paper. Sometimes, she closed her eyes and imagined him sitting next to her, telling her about his life in the city. The years passed quietly. Clara grew older and weaker. Her hair turned silver, and her hand became thin and fragile. Still, she waited. Hope was the only thing that kept her heart beating. One morning, the postman came again, but this time he brought a small envelope. It was old, the ink almost faded. Clara looked at it carefully. The handwriting was familiar. Her heart started to race. It was Daniel's handwriting. Her fingers trembled as she opened the letter. Inside was a piece of paper written many years ago. The words were simple, but full of love. He wrote that he missed her, that he would come home soon. He said he had a new job in another country, but he would send her money and visit as soon as he could. The date on the letter was from 5 years ago, the same year the letters had stopped. The envelope had been lost in the post all that time. Clara pressed the letter to her chest and began to cry. Her tears fell silently, mixing with the sound of the rain outside. That night, she placed the letter on her bedside table and went to sleep with a peaceful smile. The next morning, the neighbors noticed that smoke was not rising from her chimney. They knocked on her door, but got no answer. When they entered the house, they found Clara lying on her bed, her hands holding Daniel's letter close to her heart. She had passed away in her sleep, with a gentle expression on her face, as if she had finally found peace. At her funeral, many people from the town came to say goodbye. The priest spoke softly about love and hope. On her coffin, someone placed a letter that had finally reached her, the last message from her son. Weeks later, a man arrived in the small town. He was tall, with tired eyes and a sad look. It was Daniel. He had been living abroad, working hard to earn money. He had written many letters, but none reached his mother. He had also sent money, but his company failed, and his life had become difficult. He wanted to return home, but things kept delaying him: work, illness, and bad luck. When he finally managed to come back, it was too late. His mother was gone. Daniel fell to his knees by her grave. The autumn wind blew gently, carrying the scent of the roses his mother once planted. He looked at the simple stone that read, Clara, a loving mother who never stopped waiting. He stayed there for hours, not speaking, only crying quietly. His tears fell onto the soil that covered her grave. He whispered her name again and again, as if hoping she could still hear him somewhere. That evening, he entered the old house. Everything was just as his mother had left it, clean, quiet, and full of her gentle touch. On the table were 2 teacups. One of them was empty. The other had dried tea leaves at the bottom. He walked to her bedroom and saw the box of letters beside her bed. He opened it carefully and saw all the letters he had written to her, kept in perfect condition. He read them one by one, his hands shaking. Each word felt like a wound in his heart. Then he found a small notebook. It was his mother's diary. Inside, she had written short notes about her days, the weather, her garden, her hopes. One page said, "Still no letter from Daniel. I miss him, but I believe he is happy. I will wait as long as I live." Another page said, "Sometimes I feel tired, but I dream that one day I will hear his footsteps again." Daniel closed the diary, unable to read more. He sat on the bed and cried until the night turned quiet. From that day, Daniel decided to stay in the town. He repaired the house and took care of the garden his mother had loved so much. Every morning, he made 2 cups of tea and placed one on the table for her. He never touched that cup, but he always smiled at it as if she were still sitting across from him. He started helping people in the town, fixing fences, repairing roofs, bringing food to old neighbors. Everyone liked him, and many said he had his mother's kindness. Sometimes, on rainy days, Daniel would sit by the window where his mother once sat. He would watch the road, the river, and the falling rain. The sound of the rain reminded him of her soft voice, her laughter, and the way she used to hum old songs while cooking. The seasons changed, but Daniel never left. The garden bloomed every spring, full of roses and lilies. He took care of them carefully, just as his mother did, and each time a flower opened, he felt like she was near. Years later, Daniel grew old. His hair turned gray, and his hands became weak, but he never stopped tending the garden. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, Daniel sat by the window, holding his mother's last letter, the same letter she had held the night she died. He read it again slowly, feeling her presence in every word. He whispered a small prayer and smiled. The house was quiet, the garden peaceful. The smell of roses filled the air. That night, Daniel passed away in his sleep, just like his mother did. When the townspeople found him, he was sitting by the window, the letter still in his hands, his face calm and gentle. They buried him beside his mother, under the same old tree near the river. Every spring, flowers grew around their graves, bright and full of life. People often said the flowers seemed more beautiful there than anywhere else in town. And on rainy mornings, when the wind blew softly through the trees, some said they could almost hear 2 voices in the sound of the rain, a mother and her son, finally together again, whispering to each other in peace.